My brother tried to sell our dead grandmother's soul for $250,000. He didn't use a contract or a lawyer. He used a GoFundMe page, painting me as the villain who was holding our family hostage. I didn't just get mad. I got a lawyer, a land trust, and a new definition of the word family. And by the time I was done, the only thing he had left to sell was the sob story I'd left him with. It started quietly, the way most disasters do. Not with a bang, but with a text message. It was a picture of a sleek minimalist condominium, all glass and steel, with a subject line that just said, "The Dream." I didn't need to ask whose dream it was. My brother, Liam, had a new dream every 6 months, each one shinier and more expensive than the last. I texted back a single thumbs-up emoji and went back to weeding my grandmother's irises. That garden was my dream, and unlike his, it was real. It was rooted in the earth, not in some slick realtor's brochure. That was the fundamental difference between us. He looked at the world and saw dollar signs. I looked at the same world and saw the things money could never buy. Let me paint you a picture. I live in my late grandmother's house. It's not a mansion. It's a small 2-bedroom cottage, the kind with creaky floorboards and windows that rattle when the wind blows just right. It's modest, maybe even a little run down to an outsider, but it's attached to half an acre of the most magical, unruly, and profoundly beautiful garden you have ever seen. This wasn't some manicured English affair with perfect rose bushes and symmetrical hedges. This was Grandma Elspeth's garden, a chaotic symphony of wildflowers she'd transplanted from mountain hikes, a stubborn patch of lavender that smelled like summer in Provence, crooked stone paths she'd laid herself, and a massive, ancient oak tree in the center that she used to say was the heart of the whole property. I'm a freelance graphic designer. I work from a small desk overlooking that garden. My life is like the house, modest, quiet, and built on a foundation of peace I fought hard to create. My clients are small businesses, nonprofits. I make enough to pay the bills, keep the house from falling down, and buy the expensive organic fertilizer the heirloom tomatoes demand. It's a simple life, but it's mine. And at the center of it, holding it all together, was the promise I made to my grandmother on her deathbed. "Don't you ever let them pave it, Ilara," she'd whispered, her hand cool and papery in mine. "This garden is my soul. Keep it safe." I promised. It was the easiest and most sacred promise I'd ever made. Liam, my younger brother by 3 years, lived a very different life. He and his wife Chloe lived in a rented apartment downtown that cost more per month than my mortgage. He was a serial entrepreneur, which is a fancy way of saying he was chronically unemployed with expensive hobbies. His ventures were always grand and vague. A bespoke kombucha subscription box, an app that curated artisanal dog toys, a line of ethically sourced, gluten-free charcoal toothpaste. They all had one thing in common. They required a significant initial investment and produced zero profit before spectacularly imploding. Chloe was his perfect partner in crime. She was an influencer, which meant she was an expert at curating a life that looked flawless on Instagram, but was financed by a mountain of credit card debt. They were a stunning couple. All charm, perfect teeth, and the emotional depth of a puddle in a heat wave. For years, I was the unofficial family emergency fund. The calls would always start the same way. A casual breezy, "Hey, Elle, how's it going?" from Liam, followed by 20 minutes of him talking about his latest brilliant idea. Then would come the pivot. So, funny story. The landlord is being a total jerk about rent. Or, Chloe's car just died, it's a nightmare. The amount started small, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. I always paid. Because I'm the older sister. I'm the responsible one. Because, as my mother always said, that's what family does. We help each other out. They mistook my kindness for weakness, my stability for an endless resource. The text about the condo was the first sign that the scale of their need was escalating. A few days later, they came over for dinner. This was a rare occasion, usually reserved for when they needed to ask for something too big for a phone call. Chloe glided into my small kitchen, wrinkling her nose slightly at the smell of garlic and rosemary. "Oh, Elara, this is so rustic," she said, which was her code for old and cheap. Liam gave me a bear hug that felt more like a calculation. He spent the entire meal talking about the market. Not the farmer's market, but the real estate market. How it was booming. How people were paying insane prices for land. He kept glancing out the window at the garden, a glint in his eye I knew all too well. "You know, El," he said, swirling the cheap red wine in his glass like he was a connoisseur. "You're sitting on a gold mine here." I smiled tightly. "I'm sitting on Grandma's garden, Liam." Chloe jumped in, her voice dripping with synthetic sweetness. "But think of what you could do, Elara. What we could do. We could finally get Mom and Dad that cruise they've always wanted. We could be secure, all of us." It was a beautifully crafted performance. They were painting this picture of a shared family dream, a collective future, all financed by the destruction of the one thing I held sacred. They weren't just asking for money anymore. They were asking me to bulldoze my grandmother's soul. I looked at both of them, at their eager, hungry faces, and I felt a cold dread creep into my heart. This wasn't a request. It was a declaration of intent. The battle for the garden had begun. The pressure wasn't overt at first. It was a slow, creeping vine, twisting its way into every conversation. It was Chloe posting old family photos on her Instagram with captions like, "Family is everything. So important to support each other's dreams. #family first #legacy. It was Liam calling me to brainstorm, which was just him laying out his fantasy development plans. "We wouldn't have to sell all of it, El," he'd say, his voice resonating with that salesman's sincerity he'd perfected. "Just the back quarter. We could get a developer in to build a small, eco-friendly triplex. High-end. Think of the passive income. You wouldn't have to work so hard." He didn't understand. The work wasn't the problem. The work was the point. Tilling the soil, pruning the overgrown jasmine, feeling the dirt under my fingernails. That was my connection to my grandmother, to myself. It was therapy. It was church. Selling a piece of it would be like selling a limb. He saw a messy plot of land that could be monetized. I saw the spot where Grandma taught me how to tell the difference between mint and lemon balm by scent alone. He saw square footage. I saw the patch of wildflowers where a family of quails lived every spring. My refusal was gentle at first. "Liam, I appreciate the thought, but no, I made a promise." "Oh, come on, El. Grandma was practical. She wouldn't want you living like this, scraping by, when you could be comfortable." This was his favorite tactic, rewriting the narrative of our grandmother. He remembered a pragmatic woman who paid her bills on time. I remembered the woman who read poetry to her roses and believed that trees had spirits. We remembered two entirely different people because we had needed two entirely different things from her. He needed an excuse. I needed a sanctuary. Then my mother started calling. My mother is a woman who loves peace, but only on her terms. Her version of peace is everyone doing what Liam wants, so he'll be quiet and happy. She's never been malicious, just weak. Liam has always been her blind spot. "Elara, honey," she began, her voice weary, as if I were the source of some great family burden. Liam is just trying to think about the future, for all of us. He has such wonderful ideas. His ideas are bankrupting him, Mom, and he wants me to sacrifice the one thing Grandma asked me to protect. Don't be so dramatic, dear. It's just land. She's gone. We have to think of the living. That line, "It's just land," became their mantra. The official family gaslight. They repeated it so often, I think they started to believe it. It was a way of diminishing me, of framing my love for the garden as a childish, sentimental fantasy. My grief and my promise were an inconvenience to their financial ambitions. The tension simmered for weeks. Every family dinner, every phone call, was a minefield. I started screening their calls, letting them go to voicemail. The messages became more and more pointed. Chloe left one that was pure passive-aggressive artistry. "Hey, Elara, just calling to see if you're okay. We're all a little worried you're isolating yourself. It's not healthy to be so attached to a place. We love you." They were building their case, brick by brick, painting me as the unstable, emotional sister who was standing in the way of progress and family unity. I could feel something building, the pressure in the air before a storm. I just didn't know what form the lightning would take when it finally struck. The day it happened was a Tuesday. It was one of those perfect early autumn days where the air is crisp and the light is golden. I had a big project deadline, so I'd been chained to my desk since dawn, fueled by coffee and the quiet satisfaction of good work. I decided to take a late lunch break and walk into town to clear my head and grab a sandwich. I was gone for maybe an hour. An hour. That's all it took for them to shatter my world. I remember walking up the gravel path to my front door, feeling good. I'd solved a tricky design problem. The sun was warm on my face. I was thinking about what I'd plant in the empty bed where the summer squash used to be. And then I saw them. 2 men. Strangers. They were standing in the middle of the garden. One was holding a clipboard, and the other was unspooling a yellow measuring tape. My brother, Liam, was with them, pointing towards the old oak tree, smiling that bright, charming smile of his. He was wearing a blazer. A blazer. In my grandmother's garden. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. For a second, my brain just couldn't process it. It was like seeing a shark in a swimming pool. They didn't belong there. The man with the measuring tape was trampling on the creeping thyme that grew between the flagstones. The same thyme I had painstakingly cultivated for 3 years. His heavy work boot was crushing its tiny leaves, and I swear I could smell the faint herby scent of its destruction from 20 feet away. My sandwich fell from my hand. I don't remember dropping it. I just remember seeing it lying in the dirt. A pathetic little casualty of the war I hadn't even realized had officially been declared. "Liam?" My voice came out as a croak. He turned and his smile didn't falter. It widened. Elle! Perfect timing. This is Dave and Jim from Sterling Properties. We were just surveying the plot lines. He said it with such breezy confidence, like he was announcing he'd brought over donuts. As if bringing developers to measure my home for demolition was a perfectly normal Tuesday afternoon activity. The two men, Dave and Jim, looked at me with polite, professional indifference. They were just doing a job. They didn't know they were standing on hallowed ground. They didn't know they were accomplices to a desecration. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice low and shaking with a fury that was so cold it felt like ice in my veins. "I told you no." Liam's smile finally flickered. He walked towards me, lowering his voice into a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, I know. But these guys are the best. They gave a preliminary estimate that's... Elle, it's life-changing money. Just let them finish the survey. No commitment. We're just exploring options." "We." He kept saying "we," as if this were a joint venture, as if my home was a corporate asset and he was a majority shareholder. I looked past him, at the yellow tape snaking its way across the lawn, cordoning off the section with the oldest rose bushes, the ones Grandma had planted the year my father was born. They had marked it for execution. "Get them out," I said. My voice was quiet, but it had a steeliness I didn't know I possessed. "What?" "Get them off my property. Now." Liam's face shifted from charm to annoyance. The mask was slipping. "Elara, don't make a scene. These are professionals. And this is my home. You brought strangers into my home, behind my back, to measure it for its grave. The discussion is over. Tell them to leave." Dave, from Sterling Properties, cleared his throat, sensing the shift. "Ma'am, your brother contracted us to do an appraisal." "My brother," I interrupted, looking straight at him, "has no legal or moral authority here. This property is not for sale. It will never be for sale. Please pack up your things." Liam grabbed my arm. "Don't do this, Elle. You're being hysterical. Think about what this money could do for Mom and Dad." He was using them as a shield, as he always did. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not in a loud, screaming way, but in a quiet, definitive way. A lock clicking into place. "I am thinking about them," I said, pulling my arm away. "I'm thinking about how disappointed they'd be to know you'd betray a promise to your dead grandmother for a down payment on a condo. Now get out. All of you." I turned my back on them, walked into my house, and locked the door. I stood in the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs, and watched through the window as they awkwardly packed up their equipment, their voices low and angry. Liam gave one last furious look at the house before getting into his car and peeling away. The silence he left behind was deafening. It was the silence of a line that had not just been crossed, but obliterated. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark, in my grandmother's armchair, and stared out at the garden. The moonlight cast long shadows, and for the first time, it looked vulnerable, wounded. The sight of those men, with their clipboards and measuring tapes, had violated it in a way I couldn't unwound. It was no longer just a sanctuary. It was a territory under siege, and I was its only defender. The rage from that afternoon had cooled, solidifying into something harder, colder, and far more useful. Resolve. Screaming at Liam felt good for a moment, but I knew it was pointless. He operated in a different moral universe, one where promises were negotiable, and sentiment was a liability. Arguing with him was like trying to explain color to a man born blind. He would never, ever get it. The only language he understood was consequence. The only barrier he respected was one he couldn't charm his way through. So, at 3 a.m, with the scent of night-blooming jasmine drifting through the open window, I opened my laptop. I didn't Google how to deal with a manipulative brother. I didn't look up articles on setting boundaries. I'd been setting boundaries for years, and he'd just treated them like polite suggestions. No, this time I went for the nuclear option. I typed, "How to legally protect land from development in perpetuity." The screen lit up with phrases I'd never encountered before. Conservation, easement. Land trust, irrevocable deed restriction. It was a whole new vocabulary of protection, of permanence. A conservation easement, I learned, was a legal agreement a property owner makes to restrict the type and amount of development on their property. It was binding. Forever. It would be attached to the deed, meaning no future owner could ever undo it. They could sell the house, but they could never, ever touch the garden. They could never bulldoze the oak tree or pave over the irises. It was a promise, forged in ironclad legal language. It was perfect. I spent the next 2 hours falling down a rabbit hole of environmental law and local land conservation groups. I found a regional nonprofit, the Heritage Valley Land Trust, whose mission was to preserve natural and agricultural spaces. Their website was filled with pictures of rolling hills, ancient forests, and wildflower meadows they had saved from becoming strip malls and housing developments. They were my people. I found a Contact Us form on their website. Under Reason for Inquiry, I didn't write a long emotional story. I kept it simple, direct and professional. Inquiry regarding a permanent conservation easement for a half-acre legacy garden with significant native plantings and a mature oak canopy. I hit send. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not a family lawyer. A real estate lawyer who specialized in land use and conservation law. I found one an hour away, a woman named Miss Albright, who had a reputation for being a shark in a sensible blazer. I made an appointment for the following week. I paid the consultation fee over the phone with my credit card. It was more money than I was comfortable spending, but I thought of it as an investment. The first real investment in my own peace of mind. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my mother, not my friends, and certainly not Liam. This was a silent, strategic maneuver. He had shown his hand, bringing the developers. He thought he was playing chess, but he didn't realize I was about to flip the entire board over. For the rest of the week, I went about my life. I finished the design project. I weeded the garden, carefully tending to the bruised thyme. I acted as if nothing had happened. But every time my phone buzzed with a text from Liam or my mother, I felt a strange sense of detachment. They were playing a game whose rules I was no longer following. They were yelling at a player who had already left the field. They just didn't know it yet. The quiet hum of my laptop in the dead of night was my declaration of war. A war I had no intention of losing. To understand why I went to such lengths, why I was willing to fracture my family over a patch of dirt and flowers, you have to understand my grandmother. And to understand her, you have to understand the house I grew up in. It was a sterile environment, emotionally speaking. My father was a kind but passive man, an accountant who moved through life quietly, trying not to make waves. My mother was the one in charge. She wasn't cruel, but she was pragmatic to a fault. She saw emotions as an indulgence, a messy complication in an otherwise orderly world. If I cried, her first question wasn't, "What's wrong?" but, "Are you finished?" Liam was born charming. He was the sunny, easy child. He learned early that a bright smile and a quick apology could get him out of any trouble. If he broke a vase, it was an accident. If I broke one, it was carelessness. Our parents didn't mean to create a golden child, and a responsible one, but that's what happened. Liam learned that rules were flexible, and that someone else, usually me, would be there to clean up his mess. I learned to be self-sufficient, quiet, and reliable. I was the family's designated adult, even when I was 10 years old. Grandma Elspeth's house was my escape. It was only a few miles away, but it was another world. While my home was all beige walls and quiet anxiety, hers was a riot of color, chaos, and life. Her walls were covered in books. Her kitchen always smelled of cinnamon and baking bread. And the garden was her masterpiece. She was the one who taught me that my sensitivity wasn't a flaw. She'd see me quiet in a corner and know I was overwhelmed. She wouldn't tell me to cheer up. She'd hand me a trowel and say, "The snapdragons look thirsty. Let's go talk to them." The garden was our shared language. It was where she told me stories about her own childhood, where she taught me the names of birds, where we'd sit on the old stone bench and watch the sunset without needing to say a word. It was where I learned that some things don't need to have a purpose to be valuable. Their value is simply in their existence. That oak tree wasn't providing lumber or shade for a profitable patio. It was just the oak tree, and that was enough. It was a profound lesson in a family that was increasingly obsessed with utility and appearances. When she got sick, it was fast. Cancer. By the time they found it, it was everywhere. I was 22, just starting my freelance career. I practically moved in with her. Liam would visit, bringing expensive flowers from a florist that she thought were a waste of money. He'd sit uncomfortably for 20 minutes, check his phone, and then leave, saying he had a meeting. He loved her in his way, but he couldn't handle the messiness of death, the ugliness of it. I was the one who held the basin for her when she was sick. I was the one who read to her when her eyes got too weak. And I was the one who was holding her hand when she looked out the window at her garden and made me promise. "It's my soul, Elara," she'd said, her voice thin as a thread. "All my memories are planted out there. All my love. Don't let them turn it into something tidy. Promise me." I promised. After she passed, her will was simple. The house and the land went to me. Liam got a modest cash inheritance which he burned through in less than a year on a failed crypto venture. At the time, he didn't care about the house. It was just Grandma's old place. He didn't see its value until the real estate market in our area exploded, and suddenly, my quiet little sanctuary became a six-figure problem. My history with Liam was a long, exhausting cycle of him creating a crisis and me managing it. The time he co-signed on a car for a girlfriend who then disappeared, leaving him with the payments. I loaned him the money to pay it off. The time he invested in a friend's startup that turned out to be a scam. I covered his rent for 3 months so he wouldn't be evicted. Each time I tell myself, this is the last time. Each time my mother would call, full of worry and excuses for him. He just trusts people too much, Elara. He has such a good heart. And like a fool, I'd give in. Because it was easier than fighting them. It was easier than being cast as the cold, unfeeling sister. I was funding his irresponsibility to buy a fragile, temporary peace. I see that now. The incident with the developers wasn't a beginning. It was an ending. It was the moment I finally realized that my promise to my dead grandmother was more important than my role as my living brother's safety net. A week after my initial consultation with Ms. Albright, the lawyer, all hell broke loose. Liam must have gotten wind of what I was doing. Maybe my mother mentioned I was being stubborn and secretive. Maybe he just realized his charm offensive had failed. Whatever the reason, he escalated. He didn't call. He didn't text. He went public. I found out from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. She sent me a link with a one-line message. OMG, Elara, is this for real? I clicked the link. It took me to a GoFundMe page. The title was, Help Us Save Our Family's Future. The picture was a professionally shot photo of Liam and Chloe, looking somber and brave. Chloe had a single perfect tear glistening on her cheek. Liam had his arm around her, his jaw set in a look of noble suffering. The goal was set at $250,000. And then I read the text. It was a masterpiece of manipulative fiction, and I was the undisputed villain of the story. He wrote about our beloved grandmother and her practical, no-nonsense spirit. He claimed her dying wish was to see her family secure and prosperous. He wrote about his and Chloe's dream of starting a family, of buying a home, of giving our parents the comfortable retirement they deserved. It was all there, every Hallmark cliché you could imagine. Then came the part about me. Unfortunately, he wrote, my sister, Elara, who inherited our grandmother's property, is struggling with complicated grief. She has an unhealthy attachment to the land and refuses to see that it's a resource that could lift our entire family up. We have tried to reason with her, to show her how we could honor Grandma's memory by building a future, not clinging to the past. But she sees our dream as a threat. He went on to describe the painful decision to seek outside help. He claimed they needed the money for a down payment on a home, since I was hoarding the family's main asset. He was crowdfunding his entitlement. He had turned my grief into a mental illness, my promise into a pathology, and my home into a public commodity. He was painting me as a crazy, selfish dragon, sitting on a pile of gold that rightfully belonged to everyone. The comments started rolling in. Friends of his and Chloe's. People who only knew me as a name in their wedding stories. So sorry you're going through this, Liam. Your sister sounds like a nightmare. Chloe, you are so strong. Don't let her bitterness stop you. Family can be the worst, sending you guys so much love and light. People started donating. $10, $50, $100 from one of Chloe's influencer friends. Each donation felt like a physical blow. It was public shaming as a fundraising strategy. I felt sick. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just about the garden anymore. This was a public assassination of my character, orchestrated by my own brother. I closed the laptop, walked out into the garden, and sank onto the old stone bench. The rage was gone, replaced by a profound and bottomless sorrow. He hadn't just brought developers. He had invited the entire world into our family's most sacred space and asked them to pass judgment. That's when my phone rang. It was Liam. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Did you see it?" he asked, and for the first time, there was no charm in his voice, just cold, hard defiance. "I saw it," I said, my own voice flat. "Good. Maybe now you'll understand how serious I am. This is what happens when you won't listen to reason, Ilara. I didn't want to do this, but you forced my hand. You forced your own hand, Liam. You've been forcing it your whole life, and I've just been the one getting slapped. That's over. It doesn't have to be," he said, his voice softening slightly, trying to find that old lever of control. "Just call off your lawyer. Agree to the survey. We can take that page down in a second. We can tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. We can fix this." And that's when I finally understood. He thought this was a negotiation. He thought my love, my grief, my promise. He thought it all had a price. He thought he could bully me into a corner and then graciously offer me a way out. "No, Liam," I said, and I stood up, looking at the great oak tree, its leaves rustling in the breeze. "We can't fix this. You broke it, and I'm done trying to glue the pieces back together for you." I hung up the phone. I blocked his number. I blocked Chloe's. I blocked my mother's. Then I called Miss Albright, my lawyer. "The situation has escalated," I said. "How quickly can we get that conservation easement filed?" The fallout was immediate and messy. The GoFundMe page became a digital town square for our family's dysfunction. While Liam's friends posted messages of support, a few of my cousins and old family friends who knew the real story started to push back. One of my grandmother's oldest friends, a formidable woman named Margaret, left a comment that was a thing of beauty. Elspeth loved that garden more than anything. She would be horrified to see it being used as a bargaining chip. Ilara is honoring her memory, not hoarding an asset. Shame on you, Liam. The narrative began to fracture. It was no longer a simple story of a brave couple versus a crazy sister. It became complicated. And Liam and Chloe don't do well with complicated. My parents, of course, were caught in the middle. My father called me, sounding lost. "I don't understand, Ilara. Why is this all playing out online?" "Because Liam put it there, Dad. You need to ask him." My mother's approach was different. She sent me a long, pleading email. "You are tearing this family apart," she wrote. "Liam is desperate. Can't you just compromise? Sell a small piece. It's not worth all this ugliness." She still didn't get it. She thought the ugliness was my stubbornness, not Liam's greed. She was so terrified of the conflict that she was willing to sacrifice my integrity to stop it. I replied with a single sentence. "I made a promise to Grandma, and I am keeping it." Meanwhile, I moved forward with my plan. Miss Albright was incredible. She was a whirlwind of efficiency and righteous indignation. "This is a classic case of emotional and financial coercion," she said, peering at the GoFundMe page over her glasses. "And we are going to shut it down. Permanently." We worked with the Heritage Valley Land Trust. They sent a botanist and a historian to assess the property. They were ecstatic. They found 2 species of rare native wildflowers I didn't even know I had, and confirmed the oak tree was likely over 200 years old. My grandmother's chaotic little sanctuary was, it turned out, a small but significant ecological treasure. The process was cathartic. I was taking my grief, my anger, my love for this place, and transforming it into a legal fortress. Every form I signed, every document I notarized, felt like laying another stone in the wall. The final step was filing the conservation easement with the county recorder's office. It was a thick stack of papers, full of legal jargon and surveyor's maps. When the clerk stamped it, it felt more momentous than a marriage or a birth. It was a final, irrevocable act. The garden was safe. Forever. The GoFundMe stalled out at around $3,200, far short of their $250,000 goal. Once the counter-narrative started, the donations dried up. The public shaming had backfired. Instead of looking like victims, Liam and Chloe started to look like what they were, greedy and manipulative. Someone, I suspect Margaret, even reported the campaign for being fraudulent. One morning the link was just gone. The consequences for Liam were swift. The public airing of his desperation apparently spooked one of his investors in his latest venture, the artisanal dog toy app. The funding was pulled. His partner, seeing the writing on the wall, backed out. The whole thing collapsed. The condo dream evaporated. Chloe's Instagram posts became less frequent and more frantic. The life they had curated was crumbling because its foundation, my compliance, had been removed. Liam sent me one last email from a new address. It was vitriolic. He called me selfish, cold, and vengeful. He said I had ruined his life over a patch of weeds. He said he hoped I was happy, all alone in that old house. I read it, and for the first time, his words had no power over me. They were just the angry buzzing of a fly trapped behind glass. I didn't reply. I just hit delete. The war was over. I had won. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a quiet, lonely armistice. I had saved the garden, but I had lost my brother. Or maybe I had just finally accepted that I'd lost him a long, long time ago. It's been a year now. The silence from my brother and his wife is total. I heard through the family grapevine that they had to break their lease on the expensive apartment and move into a much smaller place, an hour out of the city. Chloe's influencer career seems to have fizzled. It's hard to sell a fantasy of effortless wealth when your life is visibly imploding. My mother still calls sometimes. Our conversations are stilted, careful. We talk about the weather, about her health. We don't talk about Liam. We don't talk about the garden. It's a vast, silent crater between us. My father sends me quiet, supportive texts, usually just a picture of his dog or a link to an article he thinks I'd like. It's his way of saying he's on my side, without ever having to say it out loud. I don't regret what I did, but I live with the cost of it every day. The cost is the empty chair at holiday dinners, the knowledge that my future children may never know their uncle or their cousins. I destroyed the family I was born into in order to protect the legacy I had chosen. And some days, that's a heavy weight to carry. But then, I walk out into the garden. The Heritage Valley Land Trust helped me secure a small grant to formally label some of the rare plants. They host a wildflower walk here once a year for their members. Last spring, a group of schoolchildren came to learn about the oak tree. They sat on the grass where the developer's measuring tape once lay, their faces full of wonder. A little girl with bright red pigtails asked me if fairies lived in the garden. I told her I was pretty sure they did. Watching them, I realized something. My promise to my grandmother wasn't just about preservation. It was about creation. By protecting the garden, I'd prevented it from becoming a private, sterile triplex. But in doing so, I'd also allowed it to become something new. A shared space. A small classroom. A source of joy for people beyond myself. The garden is no longer just my sanctuary. It's becoming its own legacy, one that will outlive me, Liam, and the memory of our fight. I learned that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the values you share. My family is now Miss Albright, the sharp-witted lawyer who fought for me. It's Margaret, the fierce old woman who defended my grandmother's honor online. It's the volunteers from the Land Trust who come to help me pull invasive ivy. These are the people who understand that some things are more important than money. They are the people who see the garden not as a commodity, but as a cathedral. True legacy isn't an inheritance you receive. It's a promise you keep. It's not about the assets you can liquidate, but the beauty you choose to protect. My brother saw a plot of land and saw a price tag. I saw my grandmother's soul, and I refused to sell. And in that refusal, I found a deeper, more authentic kind of wealth. The kind that grows in the dirt, under the shade of an ancient oak tree. So that's my story. It's messy, it's complicated, and I'm sure some of you might think I went too far. Maybe you think family, no matter how broken, is always worth saving. Or maybe you've been in a similar situation, caught between a promise and a demand. I'm genuinely curious to hear what you think. Did I do the right thing? Or did I destroy my family over a plot of land? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and perspectives mean a lot. And if this resonated with you, consider subscribing. Because sometimes, the most important battles are the ones we fight for the things that can't speak for themselves. Thank you for listening.